So hello and welcome. On behalf of the DeKalb Chamber of Commerce, I would like to welcome you to the DeKalb's Discuss DeKalb interview series. We are very happy to be engaging with leaders and experts in our community to keep you up to date with issues, trends, and events that will add value to your business. I'm Betty Willis, Senior Associate Vice President for Government and Community Affairs at Emory University, and a longtime proud member of the DeKalb Chamber Board of Directors, as well as serving on the Government Affairs Committee. And I'm particularly pleased that we have with us today State Representative Becky Evans. So I've known Becky for over 2 decades, so forgive me in advance, Becky, for not calling you Representative Evans. It doesn't sound right.
Not a problem.
I've known Becky for over 2 decades from her extensive engagement in the community, and just delighted that she is now serving in the legislature. She represents District 83. She was elected in 2019, and her term ends, I believe, in January of 2023. And of course, we anticipate you will be reelected again then.
Yeah, actually 2022. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Sorry.
Yeah, it'll.
So she's longtime resident of Druid Hills. She and her husband have 3 grown children. I think you have 2 dogs, and you love to hike.
1 dog, but my kids have dogs. So.
Okay. Well, sorry. I know I've seen pictures of both of your dogs. So
yes.
Anyway, and I know you love to hike, and you have always been a huge environmentalist and engaged in the community, and you're continuing your work in the legislature in a lot of those areas. So we look forward to hearing about some of your priorities today. But I did also want to mention that you are an Emory alum, and that of course makes me very proud too. So we are delighted to have you today. I know you are serving, you've been assigned to several committees, and I'll just go ahead and read those off: the House Economic Development and Tourism Committee, the Education Committee, the Intergovernmental Coordination Committee, and the Public Safety and Homeland Security Committee. So those are all great committees, and just look forward to hearing some of the things that you have planned to do serving on those committees, and any issues in particular that you would like to highlight today. So I guess I'd like to just start by you quickly just letting us know why you decided to serve in the legislature after all the many years in the community. Why did you decide to go down to the Gold Dome?
Well, good. Well, thank you so much, Betty. And it really is wonderful to be having this conversation with you today. And thank you so much to the DeKalb Chamber members. I'm honored to be talking with Betty and with all of you all on a broader scale today. Yes, so I decided to run for the State House for many reasons. Personally, I was at a place in my life where I had a yearning to serve a broader community. My children had gone to Druid Hills High School, a very diverse public high school. I was very active there. I started a nonprofit there, and but then they had moved on, and so I was ready. I felt my world contracting, and I was ready to look for broader opportunities to serve DeKalb. So that was going on in my life, and then I felt like I'd worked as an aide for Senator Parent. That was a part of me, like stepping out of my church and local neighborhood, and that was a wonderful experience serving with her in the State House. She's a wonderful role model and mentor, and as a part of that, I went to DeKalb House delegation meetings on her behalf, and I got to know some of the goings-ons, and I just decided that I could be a contributor in that environment. So those are 2 of the reasons that I took the plunge and decided to run for office. And I will say, when you run for office, you need to ask yourself what set goals. Even if you don't win, what are your goals? So you want to have some achievable goals. And I got some good advice from some folks, and so I went into it very clear-eyed. But I was honored to win, on that first try, and so honored to serve our community here in DeKalb.
Well, and we're honored to have you as one of our representatives and all that you're doing. Becky, what are, is there any specific bill that you're working on that's of particular interest to you this session?
Well, thank you so much for asking. Yeah, there are three bills I'm working on. One thing I will say for your listeners, it is very hard for a minority party member and often especially a new one to get legislation passed. But if you do want to have legislation passed, it absolutely you need to have bipartisan signatures. I am, and basically there's several steps. I've set goals to have bills heard in committee, goals to come out of the rules committee, and then a goal to get a bill passed this session. So we'll see how I feel like I have a decent chance with the three specific things I'm working on, but we'll see. The first one is, I'm on the education committee, and I was a bookworm as a child. I loved to read. Reading opened up the whole world to me. And so I'm very dismayed. I was very dismayed to learn when I was newly elected to the legislature. We heard on the education committee that only about a third of Georgians are reading proficiently according to the NAEP fourth grade assessment. So I feel like this is a tragedy, and and there are so many factors. And so along those lines, I'm going to be a second signer on a bill for a literacy instruction study committee. So there's a kind of a new nonprofit that came on board about 3 years ago called Science for Georgia. I mean, there are many great advocacy groups in the education field. Science for Georgia is looking at what can we do to prepare Georgians, for the future workforce. And so they held some seminars this summer addressing different topics, and one of them was about improving literacy. And Georgia has been making some strides in this field, but basically we have a lot of different silos. So we were looking into proposing legislation this session for evidence-based literacy, but we've gotten feedback from the education community at the State House, and what we're doing is we're going to ask for a study committee and bring in leaders across the state to discuss what they're doing, and to come up with a definition for evidence-based literacy instruction. I'm very hopeful that this will lead to future legislation. I'm very hopeful that this study committee will pass. So that's my first priority. The second priority is it's a much smaller bill, but I have a urging resolution for sustainable materials management and safe drinking water on the Capitol campus. So there are 9 buildings on the Capitol campus. And when I was elected, I was very dismayed to see the amount of waste, food waste. There's a lot of food waste, and there's also some recycling, but it's not followed or adhered to very well. And there's a lot of people drinking, from single-use plastic water bottles. And I was what this led me to do is just to have discussions about what can we do to improve this situation. And initially I had grandiose plans. In talking to people, we like to study all state properties, but that was just too big of a bite to take. And so I've been working with GBA and state properties and Georgia Organics and Georgia Recycling. And so we have this urging resolution for GBA to come up with this plan. And it was heard once last session, but I am on the agenda for this Wednesday, so I'm very hopeful about that. One thing as a side note from that, I helped organize a tour of the Candida building over at Georgia Tech, the living building, this fall with legislators and with the head of the building authority and the financing people behind the building authority. And it was very successful. And this gentleman that is a decision maker was at that tour, and he's been really good to work with. So I'm hopeful about this. So it's a small step, but I do think it will be good. One thing that's sad is that at the Capitol, there's this perception that the water is not safe to drink. And And so basically this calls for them to test the water at the tap, not going in the building, but at the tap. And then of course to make remedy, plan to make remedies if there are problems, and if not, to make remedies to have more water fountains and stuff. So anyway, that's a small bill, but the sustainability is really important to me. Reducing plastic pollution is of huge importance to me. Like we need to look in our own backyard before we talk about what to do statewide. And I know so many businesses have very strong sustainability and resiliency plans. So I want to give kudos to you, those of you that are already doing this good work. And of course, Emory's been an incredible leader in this field. Keenan Howitt and the whole department are such role models in this area. The state can do better too, I know. And the third one is a very small bill, but it's a constituent came to me where she went to bury her mother, and someone else was buried in her place. And fortunately, the family had kept good records, and they ended up suing the cemetery, and they won damages initially, but then they got overturned at the Court of Appeal. So it's a very simple bill. We're calling it the Burials Purchasers Protection Act. But basically, it will extend the time period. Right now, the law says you only have 2 years to make an appeal, to sue someone if they've done something like this, like buried someone, put someone else in their plot or whatever. And this will extend it, this will change it to 2 years from the request of use of burial purchases. Because who buys a, prepays for burial lot and every 2 years goes out to check and make sure no one's buried in that plot, So it's a small bill. I will tell you, the one of the most influential caucuses in the Georgia legislature, a bipartisan caucus, is the Funeral Home Caucus. I guess that's a good business to be in if you're a legislator. So I do have my work cut out for me in talking with these individuals. I've talked with several of them. I haven't talked with all of them, but the attorney that brought this that's helped me craft this legislation is he serves both cemeteries and survivors. So I'm hopeful that this will have the right balance. So those are my 3 things. And then of course I am on the DeKalb delegation, the secretary of the delegation, and we do need to pass local redistricting. In the fall, we passed congressional and state house and state senate maps, but now we need to pass county commission maps and school board maps. So Chair Carla Drenner and Chair Manuel Jones of the House and Senate delegations are taking a lead on this. We will be having public hearings. So as soon as those dates are announced, to look at those maps, I will definitely let you all know, and I ask that you participate in those public hearings.
Excellent.
Yeah, I'm sure I could. Those are the 3 main things that I personally will have my name on them. And then actually, I am a sponsor of there's a bill 460 that we hope will pass this time. The Rivian plant is going to be built here in Georgia, and right now, Rivians cannot sell in Georgia. They're prohibited by law. They have to go through dealerships. So there's a direct sale, a bill that would allow them to do direct sales, and it would protect legacy dealerships. So if GM or Toyota, when they sell their EVs, they still have to be sold out of dealerships, but it would allow new car companies to sell direct to the public. So
Interesting.
Yeah.
That was a huge coup for our Georgia Department of Economic Development. Lots of jobs. So that's great. Well, thank you for working on that too. That sounds like a oversight that needed to be tweaked and fixed. So thank you. And the other bills as well.
Actually, there is one other thing where we don't have a bill yet, but I have been working with high school, college counselors on addressing the issue of needs-based aid. Hope does an amazing job of keeping our best and brightest in the state. But unfortunately, what studies have shown is that it ends up being wealth-based, that basically students that earn Hope, generally their families make 120,000 or higher. I mean, like a huge percentage, like almost 85% or something. So, and the top 3 institutions that receive HOPE money are Georgia Tech, Georgia State, and University System of Georgia. So there are 26 schools in the University System of Georgia system. And so over 20 of them get very little, if none, HOPE money. And that is where our students, maybe with the lower high school GPAs, go. And so we do, but it's critically important that these kids, these students get an education too, and they are a part of our need for a future workforce as well. And so anyhow, we're looking at legislation for Georgia to provide needs-based aid. We're one of 2 states that doesn't provide any needs-based aid. So that's something that we don't have the bill yet. Yeah. And
wow, that's really important.
Yeah.
And I know that the chamber, as well as so many chambers, are so focused on workforce development.
Yes.
That certainly ties into that.
Yes. And I mean, and Georgia is doing a good job with work. I think we've been doing a better and better job of creating working for workforce development, working with industry leaders to motivate students to go into certain career pathways that are technical colleges. So
Good.
that is all good. It's just, this is one more thing we need. I mean, so we are making some strides in workforce development, I think, in Georgia. But this is another added piece that, at least that's what many of us believe. Yeah.
Good. And not to mention the shortage of trying to get people to, small businesses are really struggling trying to get help. And
Yes.
not sure where that's going to lead to, but hopefully it will change soon, because it's a real problem, as you know.
Yes. Yes. I definitely know, but I mean, in my experience, I've been hearing about that as well. The shortage of our workers, of our service workers.
Right. And I have to put in a plug for healthcare workers, because there's a huge shortage of those as well. And our nurses and everyone is exhausted, and so many are leaving the profession. And so we really want to encourage people to go into those professions as much as we can.
Absolutely. And I did attend budget hearings this week. I'm not on appropriations, but I attended them all just to listen. And I am very encouraged by this budget, and there are incentives for nurses and teachers. Those are two areas where they're adding new programs, and they're wanting to compensate the faculty better, especially in the nursing schools. That's been a huge issue about retaining faculty. And so so in addition to the Georgia Technical College grants, these are 2 new emphases on teacher training and on nursing training at our state institutions.
Excellent. Well, those all of those issues are important, and I never thought about the one that's impacting the funeral industry.
It's a small bill, but it's an important one. It's an important one.
Don't think about it. Those are the ones that slip up on you.
Yeah.
So, needless to say, this is a political year. So there's a lot of grandstanding, and there are a lot of issues that are going to be front and center that may not necessarily be the best use of legislators' times, but it's politics. What do you feel is the issue that is the most pressing one during this session? That's kind of hard to even pinpoint one, I'm sure. But there are several I know that are controversial, and
well, I am very concerned about, especially about this HB 888, which is basically, it's the response to the concern that the majority party, some members of the majority party have, that we're teaching critical race theory in our schools. And so it's a long bill, and it's a very dangerous bill. It's almost setting up a police state within our public school system. And so I'm very concerned about that type of censorship that could if this bill were to pass, that it would that it could create in our public schools. Maureen Downey, I love, I'm a big consumer of our local journalism, and I commend Maureen Downey. And she talked about, yes, this $2,000 pay raise for teachers is good. I'm very much in favor of that. But there are these social issues, these bills that are basically going to stalk these teachers, and one of them is this, that basically there's language where you can't. I'm sorry, I didn't print out the legislation here, but you can't talk about a topic that makes someone feel uncomfortable. I mean, there's a lot in our history that should make us, some of it, at a different point, feel uncomfortable, and that's okay. It's really important that we learn our history, our good history and our hard history. And so anyway, that is a concern. And then there's another bill that hasn't dropped yet, but the Speaker Pro Tem is saying she's going to introduce legislation that would ban inappropriate materials for being available in schools. And so that's another type of potential censorship, and I think we need to trust the process as it exists now with our local librarians, vetting the books that need to be offered. And our students deserve to see books that are representative of their lives, at their schools. So I'm very concerned about those two things. So I don't know if they're going to dominate. I'm hoping they'll stay just in the education committee and they won't get to the floor. But I don't know. I don't know yet. The other one is, I think, if you listen to Kemp's State of the State, he mentioned a lot of the, spent more time on these big things, but he just mentioned one-liners about these social issue items. And the other one was he supports constitutional carry. And that's something I'm very concerned about as well. We have an epidemic of gun violence in our country, and I absolutely believe that a big part of this is easy access to guns. And so I believe in safe gun ownership. But anyway, I'm very interested to see how that plays out, because then I heard Speaker Ralston, I read Speaker Ralston's article in some other local paper or a podcast or something, that he said that means different things to different people. So what I'm wondering is, there was a bill last session that I actually spoke on the floor against, which would expand a concealed carry reciprocity. Mm-hmm. So like right now, just as a reminder, and I'm not a gun owner, so I do have to be reminded of these things. Right now you can own a gun in Georgia, and it can be in your car. You can have it in your home or car. You do not need a license. You do not need a permit. And you can actually have a long gun without a permit. But in order to have a concealed carry, you need a permit. And I was on a call with Senator Parent last night, and 3,000 people every year annually in Georgia are turned down for a concealed carry permit for different reasons. Wow. So basically what happened last year is they tried to get a concealed carry reciprocity, whereas if you had gotten permission to carry a gun, concealed carry gun in any state, you could carry that gun anywhere. And law enforcement has been against this. It makes their job harder to know. Well, actually, the bill that they passed last year wasn't every state, but it was like almost every state, because they would have to know which state, the carry permit, if it was actually one that was legal here in Georgia and everything. But anyhow, that bill was held on the last day on sine die. We all expected it to come down, and the speaker held it back. One big reason was probably the horrible shootings that had happened 2 weeks before of the 8 members, 6 of which were Asian American. So anyhow, that concealed carry reciprocity bill did not come up last year. So I'm wondering if the speaker's saying he's going to do that and not constitutional carry, where you don't need to have any permit at all. I wonder that, but I don't know that. But I'm very much against these things. We don't need, I'm much more in favor of, having training. Right now, there's no training required, right, to own a gun, to require safe gun storage in homes and in cars. And So, to raise the age for, getting a permit right now when you're 18, you can do it, raise it at least to 21. So there are many safeguards that I feel like we need to do to have safe gun ownership. So these are things I am concerned about. I don't know if I'll fully get to the floor. One other good thing that I do want to say that I think will happen this session is that there will be a bipartisan mental health parity omnibus bill. And this is really excellent news. Unfortunately, Georgia is it's either 48th or 50th in access to mental health.
Wow.
It's really terrible. And so I went to a legislative breakfast where there were some speakers talking about this issue and talking about these fixes that we need to make. And so I'm encouraged by this. And Speaker Ralston has said this is important to him. It was not a part of the governor's package, so I'm still unclear if all the money we need for it is in the behavioral health budget or not. So there's more to learn on that. But that is a good thing that will be happening.
Yes, when I heard the speaker at Eggs and Issues mention that as one of his priorities, mental health. I'm so sorry. That made my heart smile because it's such a huge issue that there's so much stigma attached, and there doesn't need to be. That people need to, especially during the pandemic, we saw just how the impact that had on people's mental well-being and suicide rates and all of that. So
absolutely,
I'm delighted to hear that there's going to be an emphasis placed on mental health. Before we wrap up, I know we've about at the half an hour mark here. Are there any particular economic development bills that would that are you see advancing in the legislature that would be of particular interest to the business community?
Well, I will say I'm as excited about being on the Economic Development Committee. It's my new. I was just assigned to it last year, but I was very disappointed because last year all the emphasis was on a gambling bill, casino and horse race and sports betting. And so I feel like Georgia is already the #1 place to do business. I'm especially not in favor of casinos or horse race gambling because of the societal effects of those, especially 10 years down on these physical properties, what happened there with human trafficking and everything. But I'm open to sports betting. But no one's asking me for sports betting. My constituents are not saying, please, Representative Evans, give us sports betting. I mean, it is the business community that's asking for that. And so I'm not, one of the things that I was asked for last year is for it to go to needs-based aid versus, merit-based hope. And I'm not sure where that conversation's going, but so that's something that might come up. I will say, as far as my economic development for DeKalb, one little plug I like to make, and I did mention this at the breakfast, is I do think transportation is key. And, we can't talk about jobs unless we talk about how people get to jobs. And so I've been following the DeKalb Master Transit Plan, the ARC funding for it. Very interested in getting the Clifton Corridor, seeing if that could move forward. But I know our county needs to be a partner on that. And also getting some type of transit down the Candler Road corridor, the River Road corridor. So I am going to be working with the MARTA board member Rod Pearson on a town hall later this session, and we're going to talk about transportation, especially in Central and South DeKalb. But along those lines, a different type of transportation is pedestrian and bicycle transportation. And so the state cannot, fund sidewalks on resident county roads, but on state roads, your state representative can be a conduit between GDOT and the community if we need improvements on state roads. And on 2 of the roads up near me, Briarcliff and Ponce, we've had road safety audits. So one thing I'm hoping to do is a safety audit in the Candler Road corridor, get that going. And then separate from that is that I'm a big believer in trails and using and biking and walking trails. And We do have our the Outdoor Stewardship Act passed, and we have a lot of funds that are available to help communities build trails. And many communities in Georgia have requested those funds and have received them. And so far, Central and South DeKalb has not made that request. You do have to have an organized community effort. So I would love to be supportive of that. And that's something that we can do in the State House to help. Yeah.
And on the transportation front, I know I've had a number of conversations with county commissioners and CIDs and other organizations who are really eager to see that DeKalb transit master plan that was approved, I think, in 2019 by the Board of Commissioners, enact some of those projects. But until there's a referendum for a transit tax that can offer the voters to hopefully approve, it's not going to happen. So I'm really hoping that we can get the DeKalb folks behind putting something on a referendum so some of these projects can finally come to fruition. Otherwise, you have to have a local match to even apply for federal funding, and these projects are going to require federal funding, some of them, the larger ones in particular. So thank you for your highlighting that need.
Yes, absolutely.
And Becky, thank you so much for spending time with us today, and also for all that you do down at the State House. I know there can be some grueling hours down there. I have spent more than my share that down there to the wee hours sometimes. So it's not an easy job, and we really appreciate all that you do for DeKalb and for Georgia. So thanks for continuing that and being with us today.
Good. Well, thank you so much. And actually, I would be remiss if I didn't talk about that city of Buckhead. And I am very hopeful that will not move forward. It's been a slow go in the Senate, but that would be very devastating for Georgia and the Georgia bond, our Georgia bonds. It would be very destabilizing. If a precedent was set for a wealthy community of an existing city to de-annex and separate and create their own city. So that's something, an issue to watch, and I'm very concerned about that too.
Yes, and fortunately the business community, I know the Metro Chamber has been very outspoken on that, and certainly it's of great concern, and hopefully won't go anywhere.
Yes, so, right.
In committee if you can.
Yes. Yes.
So, well, Becky, thank you again. Have a wonderful weekend. Bundle up. It's going to be a cold one. And I want to thank the audience at home for taking the time to view Discuss DeKalb. And if you've viewed this video, we encourage you to share it with your friends and family and other members of the community. And thank you all for watching and supporting the DeKalb Chamber of Commerce.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Betty.
Bye. Take care. Bye-bye.